This is the introduction to the class. This class will be videoed for a massive open online course consideration. We're setting up the Korea's first Yonsei English program. And anyone not wishing to be shown in the public video must contact me or arrange to sit outside in the video. Otherwise, everybody's considered to agree to be in the video. With that, since we're going to be open to the world, please be professional, dress, act properly, represent the university, and represent yourself wisely. Related to Yonsei policies, we will be following the syllabus exactly after the grading is agreed. There's a grading I'll talk about on the next slide. No classes will be missed except for the national holidays. I will always be in my office downstairs if you need help, and we have 2 TAs for this class. But before talking to me outside and before talking quietly to the TA, please, please, please try to ask questions in class, because your question is probably the same question as 20 other students. So ask everything in class unless it's very, very personal. When communicating, I encourage you to use Chinese information, Japanese information, Russian information, international languages, but use English too. The basic language for this course is English, so if you have something else, also translate it. And that goes for with your final presentations at the end of term. You can use the other language, but you must also use English beside it. Obtain and review. This is the main textbook. Asian Management Systems by Min Chen, 2nd edition. That's the only textbook we need for this class. It's one of the best management texts that cover our subject in the world, but there are other very good textbooks. These are great, and I'll talk about that later in class. I will pass this around. You can start taking a look at this. This book was made a few years ago. This was just made basically last year, published last year by a friend of mine in Canada. And the back of this book has a lot of really, really great information, so you can take a look at that too. So get the textbook, Asian Management Systems. At the back of Asian Management Systems, each chapter, there are questions for discussion. You should know those questions, know the answers. The answers have been provided by me. The answers have been provided by other students in the past. You're welcome to review material other students have done. I have many, many files that are open to you, as is the Facebook group, East Asian Management Facebook. These are the main topics we're going to talk about this semester. General introduction to management, and I've started very, very slow. I am going to speed up soon. If somebody does not understand me, please let me know, but I like this topic. I have devoted my life to this topic. And so when I get excited, I might go a little bit fast. It's up to you. I'm teaching you why management is important. Has anybody ever read the book or seen movies related to The Outliers? Anybody know anything about The Outliers? No? The Outliers talks about how some of the most successful people in the world are nothing really special. They don't have special DNA. They don't have special brains. Bill Gates isn't really a genius. Sorry, I'm not trying to insult him, but what is interesting about some of the most successful people in the world is their environment and their time. Bill Gates. Who else is as successful as him? Steve Jobs? Do you realize they grew up in the same environment? Do you realize they grew up when the internet started? Do you realize they grew up with families and friends pushing them to be the first ones in the country to start programming and making computer stuff? And they both fell in love with this new thing at a very young age, in middle school or high school. Because they fell in love with it, they were able to develop it very, very well, more than most people. That's why they're successful, not because of their brains. That is also explained in the Outliers book by Malcolm Gladwell. In addition to that, some of the wealthiest people, some people study business and they don't understand it. Some people think business is just money. I think that's wrong. I think money is just an indicator. I think businessmen usually do something because they love it, and money is just a benefit. It's a side point. But if you do think money is important, some of the wealthiest people in the world, like the Rockefellers and Stephen Covey and those people that started the steel industry or the oil industry or the railroad industry in North America, they're much, much wealthier than Bill Gates and Steve Jobs today. But other than this week, which is Intro to Management, I'm also going to be talking about East-West comparisons. And I have purchased a school copy of videos, and I've put these CDs on this computer. I suggest all of you watch these. One video that you should watch for next week is an EBS documentary just called East-West. Another video that you should watch, which is saved here, that first video is over 1 gigabyte. So it's a pretty big size. The other one is 2 million minutes, 2 mm, 2 million minutes. Has anybody watched either of those videos before? No? 2 million minutes is basically 24 hours a day, how many minutes in that day, times 365 days a year, times 4 years of high school. Generally, it's the same for education in the United States, in China, in Korea, and in India. So this video is taking 2 million minutes of a normal high school student in the United States, showing what it's like, and 2 million minutes of a student in China and showing what it's like, and 2 million minutes of a life in a high school student in India showing what it's like. And it's showing you the big differences in how people are working and developing and trying to grow. You guys work really, really hard. At least there's the image that Koreans work very, very hard. I hope you guys do. So watch that. It will be educational. So either of those movies you can watch. The next week we'll be talking about Sun Tzu's The Art of War. The Discovery Channel on YouTube. You can easily find that on your own. It's more than 1 hour video. It's called the Discovery Channel, Art of War, Sun Tzu's Art of War. The History Channel has it. You can take a look at that for that week. The following week, we're going to be talking about Guangxi and networking. And I'm not giving you a special video to watch for that, but I will give you an article. And the article name is Social Capital. You need to be able to review all of those so we can talk about those in class. So those first 4 weeks, I'm managing those topics. After that, you guys have more than a month, 4 weeks to prepare to find some sort of other good videos that you guys can present and we can talk about in class. I don't want to control everything myself. I want this to be interactive so I can help you learn about the management and develop. So the textbook has many chapters talking about China. One reason is because it was made by a Chinese person, and I will talk about that. Everybody thinks their country is the best. Everybody has nationalistic views, usually. And in another sense, China is growing like crazy. It is the biggest country in the world. It does have the most potential in the world. So there's many chapters on China, Chinese government, Chinese business, the future of China, manufacturing in China, joint ventures in China. I'm going to lump a bunch of those together. So you need to know the basics, and I'll talk about that, but not every chapter in detail. Next, we go on into Korea and Japanese management. And there's several chapters that talk about government and business relations in Korea and Japan. Large Korean and Japanese corporations or conglomerates or chaebols. We'll be talking about that. Or what's a chaebol called in Japan? Zaibatsu. Or before the Zaibatsu, what was it called? Keiretsu. Yes. So we'll be talking about that. You'll need to understand that. You'll need to understand, an exam question will be, what is the golden triangle? Or what is Hakuna Matata? And I'm not talking about Simba and the Lion King. You guys need to understand the idea of Hakuna Matata. I'm saying it because it sounds very close to Akuma Dorai. which is a word talking about descendant from heaven in Japan, and they're talking about that. That's in something we'll talk about with Korean Japanese management. Then later, one of the most important things that I'll be focusing on almost all the time, and I encourage all of you to really, really seriously consider this in your papers and in your presentations and for every chapter. Please focus on the trends. Please understand you need to do a term paper talking about companies and compare, for example, compare Samsung in Korea to the Huawei or Harrier in China compared to Apple in North America, and do a comparison of that. But more important than just doing that, focus on how they're using technology. How are they using social media? Like I said, 100 years ago, people couldn't get information. So the companies were king. Companies used to say, we have this product, there's no alternative, you want it, take it. And I could say the product was gold, or it solves cancer, or anything. And you had to believe me because you didn't have the ability to check. Well, that has changed now with information. And companies should start to realize that. Many companies do realize that. Focus on how companies use technology to check what the customers want and what they value, and then process that to make their products or services, and then interact back with the customers. Please focus on that. Some of the key words that I will be looking at is social media, you must focus on, and MIS. What does MIS stand for? Yes? Yes? Management information systems. Most companies have big portals or computers that control all of the information. And it's generally called ERP, Employee Resource Planning Equipment. Well, now companies need to not only manage the costs of the inventory from the suppliers to the finance department, through the processing to the sales. That's the old style that started in 1999. Why did many companies start to use management information systems? Why did many companies start to use ERP or MIS, Employee Enterprise Resource Planning? Why did they start to use it in 1999? Anybody want to guess? A lot of what I talk about might be common sense, but people don't realize. Maybe it's because you guys are so young, you don't really care. In 1999, the world was going towards a disaster. There was a huge tsunami that everybody was afraid of. What was it? Y2K. Yes, everybody was afraid when the computer programs went from 97, 98, 99 to 00, all of their data was going to be reset and deleted. So all of these big companies that had billions of dollars invested in huge programs to upgrade their system and manage that. So that's why management information systems just started in 2000. And now we're past 2 decades. Well, we're at 2013. We're getting on to the second decade, or the second phase of this, that is now starting to work with social media and the big internet boom. So trends in Asia, make sure you understand that. And as I said, the whole idea of education is now free. You guys are special. You're part of Korea's premier private university in the world. Like Yonsei is the creme de la creme, congratulations. Unfortunately, you guys should use that advantage while you can and get a job incredibly quickly while you can, because very, very soon, there is a chance that nobody's going to care about it. Because you guys are comfortable. I know you guys like to go to the beach. I know you guys like to go partying. I know you guys like to drink. You guys like to relax a lot, and you've got a lot of money. Almost everybody here is generally rich. However, what about somebody in a very poor, remote part of China? Do you think they think the same way about life as you do? Do you think they work the same way that you do? Obviously, they have this burning desire to change from poverty to work hard and become wealthy. So it's going to be very normal for them to work 18-hour days. Many poor people, people in poverty, billions of people around the world, are poor. In the last few years, China took 600 million people from $1.25 a day to above that. So that was the limit for poverty. They've taken people out of poverty. Well, those people are not only now working hard, getting more money, but now they can learn everything that you've paid crazy tuition for. You've paid for the cufflinks or my car and the house and stuff. But now anybody can get that for free. And they work incredibly hard. So learn about it. Learn how to use it to stay ahead of the curve. And then at the end, we're going to be talking about negotiations and the differences between Chinese negotiations, Japanese negotiations, for example, and of course the American negotiations. Any questions about any of this stuff? I'd encourage you to be very proactive. Oops, what am I doing here? Before I go on, you can't see the screen. In the top corner, and on the last slide, I'm surprised nobody's actually said alternative proposals. You guys manage your future. I don't. Nobody is going to manage and take care of you other than you. But perhaps since you're students, you will let me control you for a few more years. But if you really want to be successful, you need to manage your future. I have suggested this grading scheme, this grading plan. But you are welcome to modify it. You need to get together and suggest we should do it this way instead. So if you want to change this, make that proposal within 2 weeks, the same time as you must tell me what is your term paper topic, and then we might agree to change it. Otherwise, we all agree this is how we're going to mark things. Is that understood? If you guys want an extra paper instead of a midterm, that's possible. If you guys all are interested in working for Samsung, for example, we can have a class in one of the Samsung branches. I know several people at Samsung. That stuff is possible, but only if you organize it and talk to me about it. Otherwise, I'm going to be going through as I have just proposed. Please learn how to negotiate. Next. This is an example of many books that I've gone through, a lot of information that I've had. I don't expect you to know all of this, but it's just pointing to why should you consider yourself happy? Why do people look to the United States? United States is wealthy, yes. But how long did it take United States to become wealthy? It took United States about 100 years to really develop. The next big economy that grew quickly was Japan. How long did it take Japan? Let's start reading this. This book, this is an image from an old book that's out of print now from Chang Soo Kim, The Culture of Korean Industries. I highly recommend you guys read this. I'm going to show several slides here. I apologize, it's not very clear. The book's deteriorating. In 1965, Korea's average pay was $105 US. $100 a year, right? How much do you guys want to make a year? You guys want to I make more than that an hour, right? Things have changed. In 1991, it was slightly over $5,500. Most of you might have been born around that time. The Korean economic growth and industrialization may mean different things to different Koreans. To most Koreans, like your parents or your grandparents, that experienced these things under Japanese colonial rule, 1910, 1945, it was terrible with the war. You didn't have anything. You didn't have a good bowl of rice to eat each day. A lot of people didn't have shoes on their feet. So now they're very proud of this fact. Near the end of the war, the colonial subjects of Japanese rule, most Korean school children were unable to wear regular shoes. Did you think about that with your grandparents? Did anybody talk to your grandparents about how they didn't have a bowl of rice? Or they didn't have shoes? Not that they didn't want shoes, they could not get or afford shoes. Hopefully that will start to impact you to realize how times are really changing. The materials were confiscated by the Japanese for the Japanese soldiers and for the people in Japan. However, Korea grew really, really fast. I said United States took 100 years to grow. Well, let's take a look at this now. In 1986, Korea was the world's largest exporter of shoes. You guys take these things and run with it and develop very, very fast. That is your culture. That is your blood. I hope you learn to appreciate that, because that fact alone you could use to market yourself around the world. You should be able to go anywhere in the world and just say, if you're competing with a job, why should I hire you, not somebody else? Well, because my culture has developed from nothing to the world's biggest in this and this and this, and that's part of my culture. Versus these other cultures, what did they do? They had everything and destroyed it all, or lost it all. So you guys can use that to grow. Leatherware, 69 million US dollars. During the Korean War, most Koreans were unable to eat 3 meals a day, as I said. Even a bowl of rice could hardly be found. By October 1988, however, nearly 2 million tons of extra rice were bought from farmers and stored in government warehouses. In 1989, the government bought an additional 2.4 million tons of rice, which exceeded the storage capacity by over 800,000 tons. You guys don't only work hard and manage yourself to grow and develop, sometimes you work so hard you make extra that it doesn't make sense. You guys are good at developing. From 1953, the Korean War ended in 1987. When this book was created and researched, the GNP increased 84 times the 1953 level. The average pay, or the per capita GNP, grew 42 times the 1953 level. The volume of trade expanded 200 times its earlier size. There's a bunch of different statistics. So it's talking about how Korea is one of the only countries that grew really, really fast like this. Recent developments in the Korean economy has also brought attention from the Western world. Everybody used to look just at England or United States. It took the United States 100 years to move from an agrarian state to an industrialized economy. And it took Japan 70 years to make a similar adjustment. Korea did it, this said, in less than 30 years. Some people say they developed from nothing. Prior to 1980s, there's basically nothing, to today, now we're number one. Basically 20 years or less, your lifetime. That's one of these reasons. And that, what I just said, could be a test question. 100 years, 70 years, less than 20 years. Why and how has rapid growth been managed in recent times? That's what we're focused on in this class. What are the differences with management in the West or in China or in Japan? That's what we're focusing on here. How do you manage? There's a bunch of different theories. I have a small handout here, if you want. This week's topic is summarized here. You guys are welcome to have that. It's already been copied here. It's open to everybody. What it's saying, for example, are the various motivational management theories and management models. How did we start to manage? We started to manage. Some people identified the styles. Who were they? They're not just the people that were doing it. Those were usually professors. So one of the first persons that was studying it was Hawthorne during the 1920s. What did Hawthorne do? As you can see here, all he did was basically go into an area and turn off the lights. He went into a factory and he turned off the lights. What would you do if I walked in here and just turned off the lights? Before I was here, I'm just outside, you don't know, what would you be doing? You'd probably be chatting with friends, maybe you're checking on your cell phone, updating your Facebook account, but as soon as you see the lights go off, what would you do? You'd probably stop talking with your friends, look up, is the boss here? Maybe you'd get back to work for safety, right? That's human nature. That's what this guy found out. Same thing, when you turn the lights on, people work harder. Turn the lights off, people work harder. Basically what he identified is when managers showed any interest or any care or any interaction, people started to work harder. So that was the Hawthorne studies. From there, he went to Abraham Maslow. In 1943, he got a little bit more complex, and he now has the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which almost everybody in the world talks about. It would be a good thing for you guys to know this. He says this pyramid has different levels. Everybody requires the same basic human physiological needs. Please listen closely to what I say, and at the end of this, tell me if you agree or not. So this world famous guy, he says all human beings have the same basic human physiological needs, such as you need food, you need shelter, you need clothing. After you have this, then you can go up to the next level. Then, and only then, you start thinking about your safety needs, like job security, safe working conditions. And after you have that, then and only then, humans can move to the social needs, social interaction, acceptance of others, friends, for example. And then he said the next human need is then you're worried about esteem, like we're looking for respect and prestige and recognition and power. And then, once you're at the top, you can get to self-actualization. You find out what you're the best at. You find out what you're good at. You maximize your individual potential. Please give me some comments on that. You might not have comments if you're used to just listening to what other people say. I hope in this class I can help you start to realize you need to think outside of the box. The world is changing. Many people in the world know this. Many people think this guy's a god. This guy's super genius, super smart. What are your comments? Yes? Yes, different, that's great. Different cultures have different styles and needs. Exactly. This was made by the white monkey or the Western person talking about the ideas and values around him. Each culture is very different. Each culture has different values and needs. So the Western person values working alone. That's why that individual self concept is at the top. However, many people, for example, in Japan, they think security is the best thing in the world. If they can get part of a big, long group that's going to have a job for life, that's the best thing in the world. So they might put social needs at the top or safety needs at the top and not care very much about being an individual or self-actualization. And we will talk a lot about that. These books that I can pass around, these books talk a lot about that. I encourage you to look through these books during the break. So yes, he's famous. You need to know this, but you need to understand that these are good for Westerners. They can definitely change. Next, after Maslow, was Frederick Herzberg in the 1950s. What he found is that everybody needed to have proper management. You needed to have special hygiene factors, which means not just soap and water and makeup, but you needed other things. What do you think he means by hygiene factors? Any ideas? Yes?
Working conditions and your fee payments from your company.
That is the second thing. He said you needed hygiene factors and motivational factors. The pay was something that motivates you. Hygiene was different though. Very good guess. That's very important. So yes, he identified that as the second group, motivational factors. But the first one, hygiene, was different. He was talking about generally safe working conditions. So once you have that, then you will stay. But if you will work to get you to work hard, that's when you need the motivational factors, like pay or saying good job or turning the lights on and off. So that's what Herzberg was talking about. Later, McGregor, he developed a new theory. He was saying there's two types of employees in the world. Employees that like responsibility and employees that don't like responsibility. If the employees don't like responsibility, they need somebody to watch over you and push you and encourage you and say, do this, this would help, this would help, this would help. That's one type of personality. The other type, first of all, that personality that needs people to be helping them all the time, they're basically considered the X model. They're X, thinking X for extra responsibility, or doing it on their own. The alternative is the Y model. With the Y model, the employees like extra responsibility. And so they will eagerly take on new projects and eagerly do things on their own. And so there's the two types, the people that you can just give a project with and they'll run on their own, or the people that you need to look over the shoulder with. And a lot of people interpret that in the Western sense as good employees or bad employees. However, this book that I was encouraging you to look at is the new book, and it's identifying how there's many cultures in the world that need a different style. There's many people, for example, in the Philippines, they say that if you are next to somebody working, if you're doing your job, and the manager is looking over your shoulder and say, oh, hey, what about this and this? That's a sign of a good working environment. That means he cares about you and he's trying to help you. And some people consider it, if the manager isn't beside you, that means he doesn't care about you, and then they don't like their job. It's the opposite of the West. So these are the first theories that have become world famous, but all of these theories have generally been proven that they need to vary according to the culture. So there's a handout talking about that. This is a summary of all of those. One theory is Hawthorne studies, Maslow's theories, Herzberg's theories, what these are, McGregor's theory, X and Y. However, McGregor also, after this, they learned at that time in the 1980s what was happening in the world. If we think about it, in the 1920s, factories were the first big thing. So what happened? The only thing you could really do then is turn the lights on and off. But as they developed, they got a better theory. And as they developed, they got a better theory. So what happened in the 1980s? What's the big thing in the 1980s that you guys know of? That you guys drive around in? The world started to change with automobiles. Japan started to be noticed. Japan started to make great cars for everybody. The Toyota cars started to go everywhere and everybody could buy them for a cheap price. Previously, it was just the GM and the Ford models, which were big, huge, heavy, expensive gas guzzlers that only rich people could afford. But in the 1980s, Japan started and changed the whole world. So we started to think from, what is their style? What is the Japanese management style? How is it different? One of the big ways it's different is in Japan, it's a sense of harmony all the time. Everybody's supposed to agree. You're not generally supposed to say no. So the Z theory is everybody agrees. It generally starts a business model, a proposal in a company will start with the people at the bottom. They will present it to their managers. Managers will agree, refine it, give it to their managers, up and up and up until it goes to the CEO. And the CEO basically says that's a good idea, and the company does it. So everybody agrees. And then he gets it refunneled back down to everybody. Doing that takes a long time. It takes decades. That's one of the reasons why people say Japan has been in a recession for a long time, because it takes so long to make changes. And because you don't want to tell your boss something new because you need to respect your boss so much. Sense of harmony and security that we're talking about. Anyway, the Z model is just everybody interacting with each other, that everybody has a say in the management style. There's a variety of styles, like the expectancy theory is talking about workers are motivated because of the rewards and high performance. Equity theory, expectancy theory, what I mean by that is that if you work hard, you might get a bonus. For example, with the equity theory, that means workers are motivated if they're being compensated according to it. That's something different. It's very close, but different in the sense of like stock options. So if you work hard, if you do 30% of the work and the company makes $100, you get 30% of that money. That's the equity style of model. You share in the benefits. And of course, the reinforcement theory is something that I like. Reinforcement theory basically means if you do a good job, I'll pat you on the back and say, cool, good job, hee hee hee. If you do a bad job, I'll kick you in the butt. Am I joking? Talk to my old students. So, here is an example from this book. You don't need to read all of this. This is just for reference. some of these things that it's saying are quite interesting. Can you guys see this by any chance? No? I've passed some of the books around. You can take a look at it. Generally what it's saying is that Maslow's theory is based on Americans. In the top right corner, it's talking about here. Maslow's theory, which is based on Americans, holds for employees outside the United States. Is that true? Well, some researchers, like Hofstede and Trompenaar, they have shown that it does not always hold. For instance, in countries higher on uncertainty avoidance, such as Greece and Japan, as compared to those in lower uncertainty avoidance, such as the United States, security motivates employees more strongly than self-actualization. Farther down it says, social needs often dominate the motivation of workers in countries such as Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, that stress or that find quality of life is most important. I think some of the key words here to understand is Hofstede. Hofstede and Trompenaar, they have come up with incredibly good tricks or ways and theories to help you understand how to manage other people, how to identify what other people's culture is. Surprisingly, you guys are smart, but a lot of people in your situation don't know how to describe their own culture. If I was to ask you, what is your culture? For example, what is Korean culture? Most of you might say, lots of people, busy, work hard. I would say, oh, you're from New York, lots of people, right? Oh, no. Hot, spicy food. Oh, yeah, you're from Thailand. Yeah, that Thai food, very spicy, yeah, or something like that. So understanding what exactly is your culture is not as easy as you think. If you want to manage anybody, can you do it if you don't know who they are? Could you be reasonably efficient at managing somebody if you don't even know who you are? You're going to be talking about crap. You need to understand who you are exactly and how you're different than other people in the world. And then, and only then, you can understand what the other person might be like. What are their values? And then you can start to manage with them or cooperate with them. Some of you have a certain type of culture that you might not realize how it's different. This book has many different examples on this. The biggest cultural factors that, for example, Hofstede came up with was power distance. These are things you need to understand, especially for next chapter, but power distance, you need to understand. Uncertainty avoidance, which Korea is very, very important. Uncertainty avoidance. Individualism versus collectivism. And then Hofstede is a great guy. His website, if you Google it on Google, Hofstede, H-O-F-S-T-E-D, his website's great. It shows you how every country is different, but he messed up in one area. He talks about masculinity and femininity. And he says that masculine cultures are like this and feminine cultures are like this. And a lot of people, although it's smart and great, many people misunderstand it. It's got nothing to do with being man or woman. What he meant and what was developed upon, what was improved by Nancy Adler from McGill University in Canada, she has refined it and she said it's not just masculine and feminine. It's called career orientation or aggressiveness, and the alternative is you're focused on relationships or family oriented. There's two types of people, and it's got nothing to do with men or women. Some people just like to be around people. Other people only want to work alone. Like in Korea, you like to work in groups, be around other people, versus in North America, people want to work alone many times. So that is kind of important. Another example here, for example, what motivates a person? Here's a small little example here. And if you read in the top right corner, what motivates a person, it's an interesting example. Before we talk about that, the rest of the page, you're not required to read everything, but if you do really want to learn, you can read this. I will encourage people to learn on your own pace. It's talking about how McGregor was misunderstood and Hofstede was Maslow was misunderstood. All these other theories need to be changed according to different areas. How many people here would like to own their own hotel? Anybody like to run a hotel? 2, 3 people? What would you say if you own the Hyatt Hotel or Hilton Hotel and you've just built it and now you need to make decorations in each room? Each room needs to have beautiful artwork. So you go, this example is talking about in Tahiti. Tahiti is the small tropical island between South America and Australia. Very beautiful place, very relaxing place. So you go there and you find this artist has some great statues or art. Say, can you make this art? I see this painting. I love it. Can you make more of these? Yes, yes. How much is this? One picture, it would be $100. Okay, I want 550 of them because I have a hotel with 550 rooms. So how much is that? What would you guess? One picture, $100. 500, how many? What's your guess? Yes?
Maybe half the price.
Half price. Does anybody disagree with him? So everybody agrees it should be half price? A little bit more than half price. So you think instead of $100, it might be $70 or $60. Great. Who would think $200 for the second picture, $300 for the third picture, and if you have 500 pictures, it's going to have to be at least $1,000 a picture? Who thinks that makes sense? Everybody thinks that's crazy here?
Is it hand drawn?
Yeah. Yes. Which is beautiful art. Yes, it is hand-drawn. You're in Tahiti, they don't have huge industries, they don't have huge factories. People go there to relax and vacation. And you found a great artist on the island, he can make this stuff for all of your rooms. But you're from New York or you're from Seoul, and you're like, what the heck, this guy doesn't know how to business. I have to teach you how to do business. Watch this Harvard video or Yonsei video. This is what you should do. You want to be rich? Do business with me. I will buy 100 pictures. You need to give me discounts. He's like, no, 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 no. You don't understand business. You want to guess why?
The repetitive work that the artist has to do will cause him some sort of like stress.
Yes.
Pain. So he deserves more compensation.
You guys are management freaks. You guys love management and growing, and maybe you're money oriented. But his value in a tropical island is not. He's just enjoying life in a hot environment where during the hot day they have the siestas, for example, or they relax. He's just having fun. If he wants food, he goes fishing, or he takes a coconut or the banana. It's a lot more relaxed than a fast-paced place like Beijing or Tokyo or Singapore or Seoul. So he likes making one picture, that's why it's $100. But making the same picture again, that kind of is boring. So if I got to do it again, I don't have any fun out of it. Yeah, I'll do it, but you got to pay double. You want me to do the same thing 500 times? That's torture. So yeah, $1,000 for each picture. Doesn't that make sense? It depends on your value. You must understand people's value. So this is just one example of the value, and this book is talking about it. There's other examples like this. My whole point today is just trying to show you management is not straightforward. Management is not just money. Management depends on people. So if you want to do well in this class, if you want to do well in life, you need to find out who you are. And most of you probably don't know yet who you are or what your values are. And after that, then you need to find out who are the people around you, what are their values, and then you can work together with them. And so that's why we're focused on management in the United States is different than management in Japan, different than in Korea, different than in China. And that's what we're focused on. So again, it goes through and it talks about these world-famous management theories that were developed by Maslow, Herzberg, McGregor, Hawthorne. Those guys were all Westerners. And so many years ago, the world used to think, oh, Oxford, ah, yes. Oh, Yale, great. Oh, Harvard, great. So whatever they said, they listened to. But now with globalization and education, people are starting to realize it doesn't work that way. And so this page is showing you the expectancy theories also change. Let's make a simpler example. So this page, as you can see here, is talking about the expectancy theories and examples of how it changes depending on each area. What is that called? What is parochialism? The main thing here. From 1948 through 1972, world exports grew from $51 billion to $415 billion, representing a 7-fold increase in monetary terms and a 4-fold increase in volume. By 1980, international trade volume exceeded $1 trillion compared with $800 billion in 75. In the 1990s, the world exports grew to 4.3 trillion. In the 90s, it was 7.1 trillion. In 1999, an increase of 65%. And by 2005, they'd grown to $12.6 trillion. And as you guys all know, since 2005, the world economy has grown like crazy. Yes, we had a global financial crisis, but that was a hiccup. Things are growing like crazy. You guys know that they've probably given more than that just to the big bankers in the United States alone. You guys are aware of one of the first times I was teaching, I think it was in 2008, when I was teaching this class in 2008. It was really, really cool because everybody was following the textbooks. Everybody thought we had to have a textbook. If we don't have a textbook, the class is crazy because textbooks are God. When I was arguing with students about how you need to have practical knowledge because textbooks could be wrong, we started this, and surprise, surprise, the second class, what happened in September of 2008? The global financial crisis. CNN basically just said, I'm sure they did it just to help my class. The world can throw out all history books because we've never experienced this before. The world business systems work different all the time. And you are now in a style, in a period, in an era, just like when the dinosaurs died, and in an era when somebody invented fire so you could start barbecuing and have beach parties. Now the world is changing with you guys. You guys have the potential to do anything. One of the things that it's talking about is, for example, in 2006, Coca-Cola produced nearly 400 products in over 200 countries, with more than 70% of its income, like an American company, but 70% of this American company, 70% of their business, 70% of their money came from Mexico. Not even United States. And now you know that most of the world's biggest companies, a lot of their business is coming from where? Here, East Asia, especially China. GM and Ford, some of the biggest companies in the world. Where are they manufacturing? China. Where are they selling? China. Samsung, made in Korea. Where are they manufacturing a lot? Yes, some in Korea, some close to us, but also a lot in China. Where are they selling? A lot in China. The Chinese area is growing like crazy. The importance of world boundaries has created a demand for managers that need to be sophisticated in global management and skilled at working with people from countries other than their own. Cross-cultural management explains the behavior of people in organizations around the world and shows people how to work in organizations with employee and client populations from different cultures and values. So please read this parochialism. Since we're on video, I'll read it also. Parochialism means viewing the world solely through one's own eyes and perspective. There's more to it, but I need to stop there, not for break, but I need to stop to make sure you guys understand this. Parochialism means viewing the world only through your eyes and your perspective. You understand that's human nature, right? Everybody uses their eyes and understands what their eyes see. Do you realize that is a bad thing? You guys are cursed because You view things through your perspective. Because you think your mom is a good person and your mom said this is good, you think always this is good. And anytime somebody is doing something different, your natural human instinct is to think that person is strange or bad or stupid and you don't understand them. You forget that that person could be from the bottom of the world and their mom is pointing the other way with a different value. So it's natural to be parochial, but it's terrible to be parochial. If you want to be successful in business, you must understand that and you must overcome it. You must understand that there are other ways of doing things and other values of things. Only then can you manage well. So yes, welcome back. We have talked about general concept of management. I've talked to you about how you must understand management is changing. You must understand culture is very, very important. We've talked about the definition of parochialism, how everybody is parochial, and how you must understand that and overcome it to be successful. Now, I'd like to show you a couple of interesting things. This is just showing you 40 different countries on power distance and individualism, collectivism. So before I explain this, I want to show you some websites. If you do a Google search for this third word here, Hofstede, H-O-F-S-T-E-D-E, you need to understand who he is and what he's doing. You will come to a website, and as you can see here, it talks about national cultures, and it shows the ideas of power distance and a definition of power distance, individualism versus collectivism and a definition of that, masculinity, femininity, uncertainty avoidance. Those are the 4 most important points that Hofstede has made, and they're explained in here. If you go a little bit farther down into the dimensions, there's very good definitions of them here. You can click on them and they will explain. What you will find more interesting is you should be able to go into this area and click on anything like, we will click on, where is Korea? Stop me when we find Korea. There's Korea. We can click on Korea. That will show us the Korean culture. And then, of course, since many people in the world focus on United States, this will show us the 2 different cultures here. Pick another country. What other country do you want to see? China. So we can also pick on here. You can pick 3 countries here. And if we pick on China, it will show you this. You would think that the Chinese culture is almost the same as the Korean culture, but you can see there are big differences. The blue being Korea, power distance is 60. China has a much higher power distance level. So the powerful people are very, very different than the non-powerful people in China. Much more so than here. Almost the opposite of United States level of equality. What is hugely different is the next one, individualism. Korea and China are very group-oriented, as you can see here, but United States is almost off the chart. 91, everybody's focused on individual. And it's not just a me, egocentric thing. It's also related to business and law, for example. In North America, when you're making a contract, it's very different than here. What do you do in Japan, China, and Korea when you're making a contract? Usually, you don't make a contract. You walk up to a guy, you go drinking with the guy, you shake hands, you get to know him. After you have a relationship, then you can do business together. If you actually say you need to talk to my lawyer, some people might be insulted, especially in the Middle East. However, in North America, they're very different. They don't care too much about the relationship. They want to know the exact wording in the contract terms. So you give them some sort of proposal, let's work together this way. They're going to examine your contract wording under a microscope and then get their lawyer to look at every wording. What about this meaning? Do you mean this meaning or the second meaning or the third meaning of this word? Not the same here. So it's individual in detail, not just person. It's a big thing to know. The next thing that you might look at is skip over to UAI. What does UAI stand for again? uncertainty avoidance is very important to understand. And you can see here is that Korea is off the charts. Almost the maximum number of uncertainty avoidance in the world. What does that mean? That means Korean culture is the most or the strongest culture in the world for avoiding something new. How does that work? Well, let's apply it to class. In Korea, some students would avoid putting their hand up and talking in class, even if you know the answer. Versus in Canada or United States, they're going to put their hand up and just say it anyway, even if it's a guess. So make sure you understand Hofstede and these uncertainty avoidance, power distance, individualism, collectivism factors. They're very, very important to know. I want to jump over to another thing. Yes? That's the penis and the vagina thing that can be confusing. It has nothing to do with masculinity and femininity. MAS stands for masculine. Hofstede confused the world with that. That's why I use this book more than his book. This book has confirmed that MAS should be career orientation and aggressiveness versus family oriented or relationship oriented. So the new books and the new theory uses power distance, individualism, uncertainty avoidance, and the fourth one, which is newly termed here, is the career-oriented versus relationship-oriented or family-oriented. Good question. The last one with long-term orientation, I would say skip that because it is confusing. Hofstede realized he's a white monkey like me, he's a European person, he's making a Western type of theory that's, although it's supposed to be for the world, he is parochial, everybody is, they can't easily control it. So he tried to identify Confucian cultural values, and so he tried to hire somebody in China to partner with him to fix his theories. Unfortunately, the problem was he hired a British person in Hong Kong to study somebody that they don't still understand. So it's kind of confusing. Let's look at another thing. This whole concept is the basic part of the class. You need to learn about this. How do you want to learn about this? You need to, let's see if I can do it this way. Can I do it? Hey, this is cool technology. Man, you guys live, I don't know how to do this. Technology is changing so fast. Here's a perfect example. One of our next week, we're talking about, this is a video I encourage you all to watch. This is called 2 million minutes. It's working, it's okay.
Occasionally I do one, like over the weekend, we'll see.
Occasionally, sounds like you guys.
Presentation in my macroeconomics class. And I started it on Sunday at about 4:30.
I got a project, I start Sunday night.
You're working on that.
Sounds familiar.
Because I want to do pre-med, I know it's
Pre-med, a genius student.
So it's not going to be as much fun.
What's she focused on?
College was kind of a big step. It's just where you kind of learn to balance free time and studying. I want to join a sorority, which obviously you get to party a lot, you have some fun.
America is the one country in the world that doesn't seem to recognize that it's in competition for the great minds in the capital of the world.
Beware, you're almost the same.
This is my strength in numbers. 我非常睡也是在情况会看。
I read this at night before I go to bed.
这就是我第一次看到微积分的题目，就是它就是在这里
Get this?
非常
It's more advanced than the teacher teaching.
这么一回事情。
Americans aren't globally aware. They're more worried about what's happening in their community than they are in the world. Americans don't know they can be with the Chinese.
Brains are everywhere. Discoveries can be made everywhere. And industries built on those discoveries also can be anywhere.
You have to find A in the first equation, then substitute.
Welcome to India.
India, once you get into this academic course and you're serious about it, you don't have much of the option choose between academics and something else. It's either academics and nothing else.
The people who are potentially losing their competitive edge are Americans.
So it's focused on those two students, typical students in the States, typical students in India, and typical students in China. It shows you that you must understand people are different, they're working differently. Each has 60 minutes, 24 hours, 40 minutes a day, 365 days a year, 500,000 minutes a year, 4 years, 2 million minutes. How do they spend those minutes? So that's what we're focused on. The video goes on. It actually shows this high school in North America. It's considered a good high school. It's a blue ribbon. It's a national excellence high school. And those students are considered pretty good students. And you saw how well they're doing. It's pretty shocking to see the changes between North American cultural differences and the Chinese and the Indian culture differences. In these notes, I have the study notes for you guys. It's also talking about the Maslow, Herzberg, Hawthorne. This is summarized here. But it also shows something like 800,000 minutes are studied in India, in China. 600,000 minutes a year are studied in India. And how much are the American students studying? Something like 160,000 minutes a year compared to these other countries. And some of the things that are different are that they might not be considering Hagwons and extra academies. The whole idea that in high school you might go to a special preparation academy to learn more before normal school, and then you have regular school, and then you might learn more in academy after school. That doesn't generally exist in North America. So this is generally the basic concept. You guys need to understand how much it's different. The concept's really interesting. Then that's one movie I suggest you watch. Another movie I suggest you watch is this. This is by EBS. I have it in Korean and I have it in English. You can have both. It's really interesting. It's showing you pictures. You show a picture to somebody, and depending on where you're from, you see completely different things.
Or group B on the right.
What it shows is some people see it belongs in different areas. A freak. Everybody's unique, right? However, that was in Japan, Tokyo, and Beijing. We go over to North America. What do we see? Well, he's bald. He's a freak too, right? You get the idea. It goes along. It talks about other interesting differences.
Objects are thought to exhibit through these understood.
This video, even though it's an EBS TV show, it has professors from the University of Michigan, professors from Cornell, Harvard, Berkeley are talking in here, explaining how things are different. And it's not boring. It's really interesting. It's showing that what you think is natural can be shockingly different.
The West believes there was a transaction and distance, whereas 25 years ago,
Japanese gardens.
How gardens are a reflection of the culture. Which one matches? Shows you three things. Which ones match? Korean. And it's not just age. You can see that it's built into your values. Whether you're old or young, you can show some of these differences. I'm not going to go through all of it. This is just a sample to show you these things. It's a very interesting video. You might want to watch it when you're having a beer. Another thing that you might want to watch is, in addition to these videos that you should review for next week's information, the following week you might want to be able to go through this. This is another website. You guys can see this, right? www.coursera.org. It shows a whole bunch of different foundations of business strategy, all sorts of different courses for free online. Here's another one from Harvard. Harvard classes, free online, talking about Chinese studies. For example, you can go over to here, we need to understand Confucius, for example. If you could click on this, and you can watch this on your smartphone or whatever, as I do, but then maybe you will think I'm a little bit strange too. Next, in India, this is a selection of many different basic courses in India. And more in India, this is altogether, there's over 1,000 courses, almost 2,000 courses available in India.
It's worth asking why is he doing this?
This is the Harvard course teaching you what is Confucius, what is Confucianism. So he's got the video and he's got some other things, but he doesn't have the interactiveness like we do, so we're better than Harvard. So if we click over to this next part, I think the Indian system, which you can see here if you do a Google search for NPTEL, the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning in India, they have, again, over 1,000 courses, I think almost 2,000 courses in almost anything. You can pick a whole bunch. This one is a course you can pick. It's the general website, go into courses, basic courses, not even management, basic courses, the concept of management, and you can see through here each chapter that you want to see is on the video. And it's showing here comparison of Japanese and American management styles. Unfortunately, this guy's, I think, a little bit boring, but he's showing you how Japanese companies recruit people and how it's different than American people. So these are just the different examples. I hope you guys understand. And we'll get back to this. Work, okay. So we've talked about management's important. We talked about how management is different between people. Now we need to understand there's different styles of management. Some people say there's autocratic style, which is different than participative style, which is different than the free rein style. Some people, as you can see here, it says laissez-faire. Well, my family's part French, so I understand French, but what this actually means is relax, don't do anything, do whatever they want. And in general, these theories, many of these management theories were created by Western people, thinking the best style, like all people with human nature, is your style. So they'll say the best is in the middle, their style. This other extreme, French people, they're crazy. And then the Chinese people or the East Asian people, they're crazy, so they'll say these with different words. A lot of people might say autocratic style with a different name. They might call it dictatorial style, like a dictator. Somebody says something, everybody's got to do it. Some Western people might say that. However, the exact same thing described in Japan, China, or Korea would probably have a different name. What would that different name be? If you actually think deeply about it, as a scientist, you would try to think, well, where does management come from? Management generally comes from an extension of the family. Families generally are controlled in a certain way. In most of East Asia, you'll have the father basically going out and making this money, traditionally, maybe not today, but whatever the father, because he's making the money, the father says, you do this, you do it. And if it's related to your education, that's the responsibility of your mom. You need to study, talk to your mom. But it's fatherly. And that runs over because traditionally, families, especially in China, most businesses were managed as a family businesses. Business management studying style in China, there's two types. State-owned corporations or the family corporation. Both of them are still the same style. You get one older guy going in, running things, telling the younger kids or employees what to do. So it's parental style. Or what do we call that? What's a way to call a father? Yes, patriarchal. Yes. So that style is a nice name. It's basically saying companies are run basically by one father that's supposed to care about people underneath them, and he makes most of the decisions. But Westerners might see it as completely different, and they'll call it dictatorial or autocratic. So understand there's these three styles, and then we might get into, well, North America is very different, there's changing. There's the Google style, or Steve Jobs style. Well, if you think deeply about Steve Jobs, some people say Steve Jobs allows people to do anything. However, why was he fired? He was fired because he was so much of a dictator, he would go in and throw desks around his office and stuff like that. He made people do exactly what he wanted. That's one of the reasons why he was fired. However, he was controlling everything, but at the same time, like Google is doing nowadays, they allow people to run on their own. Like Google says, you're allowed to have 20% of the time to develop whatever you want. A lot of people have taken that and they call it like the FedEx days in Australia and New Zealand. You have the FedEx day, for example, every Friday you work on whatever you want as long as the next day, overnight, FedEx, overnight, you deliver new results. So they think, oh, that's good, Google's growing so fast, let's try to copy it in China, Japan, or Korea. Well, it might not work if your values are different. So you need to understand what is the autocratic style, what's the participative style, what's the free reign style. Those are great for models and theories, but they might not always work. So let's look at the next part, levels of management. You guys all obviously understand it's pretty basic. The president at the top, chief financial officer or chief marketing officer, vice president, in the middle management, and then supervisory management. There's different styles of this. This is basic. Here's a general big company organizational chart. Everything from a Hong Kong office to an LA office, through to the vice president, president, and the chairman. You guys are somewhat a little bit aware of that. Being in Korea, we understand the basics of what is a chaebol. A chaebol is a business group or a conglomerate consisting of large companies that are owned and managed generally by families. Well, if you talk to a Western person or a lot of people in marketing, they might say, no, it's open, it's a public company, anybody that has stock or invests, they own it. Well, it's true. In some ways, the founder or the Samsung family guy that was running, or the CEO and the chairman of Samsung, he only has a little bit of stock. However, the way that he's managed to invest and run the company, he can still control almost all of the decisions. It's the same way in Japan. So in North America, you would think it's a free country, it's a free company, and there's a lot of democracy for controlling things. It's not always what it seems. Sometimes the CEO can do things behind his back. At the center of each group is the Hwajangnim or Sajangnim or chairman, who is the dynamic and cohesive force of the group. Most typically, he is an entrepreneur. However, in the last 50 years or so, they've kind of been encouraging people not to be entrepreneurial. But he founded the country on this company. And he leaves the management to a relative or a close trusted friend. In Japan, it can be unrelated person by blood, but in Korea, it generally has to be blood connected. In China, it's less so. It could be related to anybody in my state or in that whole area. So blood is different depending on, and family relations is different depending on which country you're in, China, Japan, or here. Majority shares in the various enterprises are held by the chairman and his immediate relatives. Guidance, directions, however, remain highly centralized by that person. So this one person, the fatherly figure, makes all these decisions. You might have already been aware of that. Let's go to the next level. You might be aware back in 1984, there was a ranking of enterprises and conglomerates, or the chaebol in Korea. All of the top 5 chaebol, they generally had on average 136 other companies related to them. The average number is here. The top 10 chaebol or the top 50 chaebol, even the lower, smaller chaebols, still have 542 affiliated companies with them. So they're very, very broad sensed. So if we get into it, what is Samsung? What is Hyundai? What are the biggest cultures Or what are the biggest companies in Korea? Do you guys know? What is the difference between Samsung and Hyundai? Can anybody say? Since we're Korean, we might know. But do you know? We take a look at it here. Koreans often refer to these as very different corporate cultures of these giants, Samsung and Hyundai. Corporate culture of Samsung is basically conservative. The largest Korean enterprise, it was founded by Lee Byung-chul, who is the youngest son of a wealthy, rich guy with real estate, landlord Yongban Orjin, who attended traditional Confucius Sodong, and later a university in Japan. A lot of people keep saying, Samsung, 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 Korea, 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 and they don't actually realize that Samsung's very, very much Japanese. It's almost at least a 30% Japanese style, 30% Western style, and maybe 30% Korean style. It's very interesting. People don't actually think about these facts. And it's because he was brought up living in Japan, so that's his values. The corporate culture, the managerial style, the manner of Hyundai is the opposite. It's characteristically adventuresome and risk-taking. The second or the third largest of all Korean companies. Hyundai was founded by Chae Ju-young, who was the first-born son of a farmer. And he didn't even go to the special schools and stuff like that. And so when you take a look at a lot of the Samsung people, as we see in the next, I think it's the next slide, Hyundai's corporate culture is believed to be progressive, creative, frugal. A farmer can't just throw money away, right? A farmer is supposed to be conservative with plants and seeds and money. And that goes through and reflects the culture of Hyundai nowadays. Hyundai employees are called the Hyundai men. They proudly wear working clothes. You won't see them with fancy cufflinks very often. You won't see them with Gucci or Hugo Boss shirts and coats and stuff anymore. However, you take a look at the Samsung, many times the CEO or the chairman of Samsung, they're wearing bright pink Gucci suits or bright yellow suits. You almost never find that on Hyundai guys. Samsung emphasizes the superiority, number one-ism. They've got to be clean cut. They've got to be looking good. If you're not, you're probably not going to get too many promotions and stuff as easily. Yes, they're opening up. Yes, they're globalizing. Yes, they're hiring many people outside of Korea. Yes, they're hiring more and more women. But how many women are getting to top management? How many women actually are able to take advantage of these things? So when you're researching these companies, don't just listen to the propaganda. Check the facts. They say that it's open to the world. Anybody can invest and control and be an owner in Samsung. But who really makes the decisions? They say that women have the equal rights, but check. How many of these women are controlling these things? Samsung men wear a coat and tie, maintain clean, combed hair, and look smart and polished. We can go on and talk about some of those details. There is quite a bit of interesting things right there. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'll go over into here. You know quite a bit about Korea. We are going to learn more about it, but let's get back to why should we study Asian style? Why don't we study the Harvard style? Why don't we study GE style? Why don't we study the Walmart style? Well, surprisingly, not only did Walmart fail in Korea recently, one of the world's biggest companies, one of the world's biggest employees, crashed and burned in Korea because they didn't understand the culture. But more importantly, let's look at history, which is an East Asian thing to do. Usually in East Asia, you want to predict the future, you want to predict who's going to, which cities or areas are going to have floods or earthquakes. What do we do in East Asia? We look at history. What do they usually do in North America? They look at scientific things and look for the future. Even looking at the kids' comics. In North America, kids' comics are looking for flying around in jet planes, like the Jetsons. I watched a lot of the comics, like even Superman and Spider-Man. These guys are flying around the world. Versus what do you have for the comics in East Asia? The Monkey King and old traditional soldiers and things. You look to the history. Even the dramas and movies today are very, very popularly focused on the past in East Asia versus in the future in North America. Big differences. Well, let's look at the past. This shows in year one that China controlled almost 30% of all production in the world. India had even more than China. India was huge. India controlled the world. It was the biggest business in the world. But within 1,000 years, India started to shrink. China was basically the same. 1,500 years, India shrunk more, China started to grow a little bit more, and we will note that United States was nothing, didn't exist. And we keep moving forward, and what do you see? You see that China, up to 1820, China controlled the world. China was the best management, the business center of the world. India was huge. North America basically didn't even get noticed. However, then things started to change. China had a hurdle, they fell down, they started to go down, but it has come back. It's starting to grow enormously, and we're going to look at these differences. Does anybody know of the book? I think it's called, was it 70s? When did Columbus sail across the ocean? Anybody know? 1492? 1470, anyway. You know, that year that Columbus supposedly discovered this huge new continent, there's very interesting theories that some people are saying that when they went over there, there was already civilizations. There was already huge big statues built. There's big buildings built. Even though these European people discovered this area, of course there was Indians, but there was also Chinese communities, and a lot of Chinese, even huge cemeteries. So some people say that the Chinese people used their huge ships sailing around the world before Columbus did. You guys know Columbus sailed across the sea from Europe, from Spain and stuff, and discovered North America. Why? Because they were looking to do and expand their business by getting to China. They just went the other way thinking they can get around. Why did they think they could get around? Because China taught the world is round. Originally in Europe they thought it was flat. So China taught that, so they were trying. Anyway, the point was, Christopher Columbus, he was saying that he's going to get around. He took this huge ship with about 70 men, and he sailed, there was, 3 ships, 3 Spanish ships. He went around the world looking to expand business. Well, what happened long before that, Chinese ships, which was, if Christopher Columbus's boat was like this big, the Chinese ships were like this big. Not 100 people, but 3,000 people or 30,000 people on the Chinese boats. And there was a whole flotilla of them. Many of the Chinese boats went around the world before Christopher Columbus. But during the Cultural Revolution, for example, all historical documents, a lot of it was destroyed. There's no proof of that anymore other than seeing the Chinese cemeteries in many of these other areas. So it's interesting to see. America grew very, very fast, but as you guys know, America's economy is deteriorating very, very quickly. Let's get on to this. I already talked to you about what is parochial in the first part of this video. You must also understand ethnocentric. Ethnocentric orientation means using your own culture as the standard for judging other cultures. So you're a little bit better than parochial. Parochial is just you're using your eyes and your values for everything. Ethnocentric is a little bit better. You understand there is an alternative, but you're just comparing it to yours. You're saying that, well, I'm coming here, why don't they have good pizzas here? Why do they put corn on the pizzas or something like that? Where everything you're being critical and you're complaining because it's not as good as what's back home for you. So it's still kind of ignorant in some ways. You need to get to the next level, which is polycentric, which means the mindset in which a manager develops greater affinity with the country in which he does business. Or geocentric, a global mindset in which the manager is able to understand a business or market without regard to the borders. Some people ask at international conferences, you're going to do international business, which language should you learn? Well, a lot of people are saying, of course, you have to learn English. And a lot of you, everybody in Korea, including your grandmothers and grandparents, are probably studying in English. However, that's not always a smart thing to do. You must understand the best language in the world is not one language. It is your customer's language. Wherever your customer is, you must speak in their values. Otherwise, you might as well speak to a tree. And people forget that. That's called SRC. You need to understand SRC. SRC stands for Self-Reliance Criterion. That could be a test question. SRC is an unconscious reference to one's own cultural values, experiences, and knowledge as a basis for decisions. In general, your mother taught you this was good, so you think everything around you that's like that is good, and if anybody does something differently, you think it's bad or strange. Well, that will prevent you from really growing, especially when you realize you must work with China, or you must work with Japan, or you must work with India or United States, which is very, very different. Ethnocentrism, we already defined, is the notion that your own culture or company knows best. I've taught several very, very smart people in EIC and Yonsei. I met some incredibly talented people that have gone on to make very good investments and grew some big companies. One student, I won't name the name because it's illegal to do so in Korea, but very, very smart student, interested in studying law. They were saying, yes, I understand these cultures, and I understand American culture, and I understand the Chinese culture, and I understand the Japanese culture. Yeah, these are really, really good. It's just that Korean culture is better. And everybody around was like, yeah, I agree, yeah, our food's better. They're forgetting that that is a very ignorant thing, and more importantly, they're forgetting that somebody else said that a few years ago. Who was it? Hitler. Be careful. What is the definition of culture? Incorporates both objective and subjective elements. Subjective aspects include attitudes, norms, and the most important thing in my mind, values. Values are a very, very important part of culture. Also, ideas, customs, and other meaningful symbols. Objective aspects of culture include tools, roads, TV programming, architecture, other physical artifacts. Hofstede, as I showed you the website, you might need to know this. It was a well-known Dutch organizational anthropologist. He viewed culture as a collective mental programming, or some of his famous articles are called the software of the mind. In general, it's how we think, reason, and value things. Socialization and enculturalization, I think you guys understand the basic definitions of that, so I'll skip forward. To show you an iceberg model. You think you can learn things. Many people in Korea memorize entire dictionaries. You know the definitions, but 10% of culture can be seen. 90% cannot be seen. Understand that. This shows you an example. Most of culture is like an iceberg, it's underwater. There's no right or wrong. It's not individual behavior. I'm going to skip forward to several of these things. It's interesting to note, more interesting trivia, understanding how people talk. There's low context cultures where people say all of the details, or high context cultures like Korean, and they don't say any details. What does that mean? When you're talking, some people must understand that everybody's part of a group, everybody thinks the same way, everybody understands this, so you only need to say one word. Pegopa. Well, you say that to a Western person, and they're going to say, what? Pegopa, what does it mean? Well, in Korean it means hunger or hungry. Or, are you hungry? Or it also means, do you want to go to lunch? Or it means, do you want a steak, or do you want a drink, or I want to give you food. It means many things, versus in North America, they don't understand the difference. Korean people understand the differences. So in Korea, because everybody understands, you don't need many words. But you look at me, I use lots and lots of words. I'm from a low context culture. You need to understand lots of these words. There's high text. And then we get back to Hofstede, as I talked about. I'm just reviewing. They have individualism versus collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, and then the terrible, what's the proper way to describe this? What does Nancy Adler from McGill University, in this textbook that I handed out in class, what does she say number 4 is called? Career-oriented versus family or relationship-oriented, right. Let's go through onto this so we understand these basics. Are cultures converging? So let's start talking about that. Now we get into the actual textbook. Now our class is starting. We're looking at what are the management models. Don't worry, I don't think this is terribly important. I've already covered a lot of the major things. This is how the first 4 weeks of class are going to be. I'm going to be giving you all the information for these first 4 weeks of class. What are the management methods or models? Generally there's 4. There's economic style, an environmental style, behavioral style, or an open system style. And they all basically developed over time the same way. You started, the first theory was number 1. Second theory, number 2. The most recent theory, number 4, which means, at least in my opinion, I vote number 4 is the best. Open system. Can you say we should do things based on number 1, what is economics? I'm summarizing all of the rest of the slides right now in like 2 minutes. Economic development model means money rules. He who has the gold makes the rules. If you are a big, rich CEO, you do it this way, in some sense. But the management model number 2 says, no, it depends more on your environment. It depends on where you are. If you're in a poor area, you have to work together and manage differently. Or if you're in a tropical area, you need to work together to overcome the winds or the hurricanes and the tsunamis or something. And then they became more advanced and they said, no, 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 it doesn't depend just on your environment. It depends on each person. For example, their behavior. Sometimes you have hardworking people, and sometimes you have boring people, or not hardworking people, some people are saying. So it depends on the behavior. However, the last system is you need to keep an open mind. Understand what is your culture and be open so that you can understand the other people might have a different way of doing things. So let's try to explain that quite quickly, just going through it quickly. This first theory, economic development model, it started in the 1950s by Harbison and Myers. It's generally saying the initial large-scale projects of industrialization in developed countries, it raised the notion that managerial beliefs reflect the country's level of industrial development. The richer you are defines how you manage things. It was a macro model, concentrating on the examination of trends in management rather than managerial practices at the micro level. The hypothesis that there is a universal logic behind the process of industrialization of all nations. An agrarian, feudalistic society. Number 2, to an industrial democratic system. So some people say that for developing, you need to start with farming, for example. Or even before that, what would you do for management before farming? Historically, cavemen, what do? Cavemen didn't farm. Cavemen would start with hunting, right? And just go out and pick up things. So the very first was hunters and gatherers. That management style controlled the world for a while. And then we got into the Indians and planting and the agrarian style. And then we got into the Industrial Revolution, making factories. And then we got into people doing the scientific style. Each person specializes in something, and you have your competitive advantage or comparative advantage. So that's what we're basically talking about here. Number 2 is the environmental model. In the environmental model, which was developed later in 1965 by Farmer and Richmond, they developed a macro model that considers culture. It's important for influencing management. A number of external constraints, such as legal details, is important. Politics is important. Economics is important. Social, cultural, educational things are important. You will never do very well in Korea because you're an Asian poor country. The only way for you to do well is you need to go to North America and go to Harvard, or go to the United Kingdom and go to Oxford. Some things like that. Well, surprisingly, most of the fastest growing universities in the world are now in East Asia. Congratulations again, Yonsei. That's what it's talking about, how the environment impacts what you're doing. Harbison and Myers, Farmer and Richmond, they're focusing, first of all, Harbison and Myers focus on the economic factors in the environment. Farmer and Richmond, they're conceptualizing the environmental factors in a much broader context. Traditional universalist studies have conducted in a black box, which exclude environmental factors. It's valid when the external environment is the same for all companies. That's, in general, economics. Don't tell the other economics professors, but they're saying economics works great in this situation, in this theory. But it's in a black box. It's making a hypothesis, assuming this is constant, but you can never assume that in management. The world is always changing. So that's why we get into the next theory, the behavioral model. In the end of the 1960s, the behavioral model began to gain popularity among comparative management scholars who tried to explain behavioral patterns of individuals and groups in organizational context. Micro. The basic premises was that management practices and effectiveness depends on the culture. Variables such as attitudes, beliefs, values. They need hierarchies, for example. That's much more important. The behavioral research, there's a tradition of employing empirical methodology. And these are some scholars that were supporting this. Unlike the macro models, this school adopts operationalized cultural variables and divides them into 3 different categories. And those are the people that created it: Davis, Barrett, and Bass. It shows that national characters shape which are related to the specific organizational behavioral variables, and also attitudes and perceptions of managers regarding key management concepts and their activities shape the management. And the popular beliefs and the hierarchies and the value systems in a society, obviously those impact the management. So it's talking about the behavior is important. So let's go over to the open system. The open system was developed when I was born, 1970, developed in the 70s, actually 71. Nagandi and Prasad, they said that the environmental and cultural factors were the main determinants of management practices. The management practices of 2 comparable business enterprises or companies, sometimes in the same culture, should be similar. So I get back to what I said earlier. If you're operating in the same environment, you should all work the same way. But that means when E-Mart, the big retailer in Korea, is working, if they're doing the same thing, just selling many discounted things, and Walmart is selling many different things, you should basically be the same. But it's not working. We know that Walmart basically failed in Korea because they didn't take into consideration Korean cultural values. There's many different things. For example, even though, and sometimes when you're doing your research, please remember that what you find at first might be misleading. A lot of Korean people say, oh, I want lots of space. I want to go to a place that has lots of open space, big ceilings, very luxurious. That's good. That's what I want. But if you really, really think about it, you go to those places and you usually won't find too many Korean people. Korean people are usually more comfortable sometimes when there's a lot more people together. You go to the best department stores and you'll have 10 different people coming to help you right in front of you, which is the opposite of what you will find in North America. In North America, some of the best department stores or restaurants are those places where you don't see any workers, but you drop something on the floor and they will pick it up before you do. You can't see them, but they're there to help you. In Korea, it's the opposite. There's so many there around you, you drop something, you can't see it because somebody's standing on it. Try dropping something on the Seoul subway at rush hour. It argues this. We get more into it. The management process is dependent not only on the external environment, constraints, and culture, but also the management philosophies. Management philosophy, what is that? That's the management's attitudes towards and beliefs regarding what's the government, what's the community, what's the consumers thinking, what's the distributors doing, what are the suppliers doing, employees and shareholders. We can't just say, we come here and we do it this way. Samsung is rich. Samsung is successful. Samsung's doing very, very well. But they will not continue to do well if they go to the other side of the world and they say, we were successful doing this, you must continue doing this. It's the same thing as Walmart. Walmart was successful in the Western world, but when they came to the East in Korea, they kept doing the Western model and they failed. You must consider these other differences. This is an interesting pictorial. It's saying the management philosophy, all of these different things together affect the environmental factors, and that affects the management practices, and the practices change the management effectiveness, and the effectiveness changes how well the enterprise or the company is doing. It's pretty basic. I think I am almost at the end. I've already talked to you about this, so we're finished. Hofstede, you know, he has these 4 areas. You know, I already talked to you about McGregor was saying one thing, but the truth may be a different thing. What about South Korea? We were talking about how the role of culture and comparative management. Adler points out in that small book the difference in terms of types and rewards that motivate people. When I first came here in Korea, I started giving lectures about 20 years ago. And being a North American, thinking that you know, people were like me, individuals, maybe they liked money or something like that, I tried to talk, I still remember, one class, even at EIC, 2008 when I started, I wanted students to talk to me. I wanted students to argue and share their understanding, so I know they understand the concepts. So I gave prizes. I actually paid students for giving me good comments. I started giving away, here's 10 bucks, here's Manon to talk to me. What happened? Nobody really talked. And then the next year I think, okay, so maybe it's not money. So I did a survey. What do you guys value? Food, we want food or drink. That's what the students said. I'm testing the students. So I went back to the Western management style thinking that the expectancy theory or the equity theory, that's what you want? Okay, I'll give it to you. In class, you talk to me, I gave you coupons to go to Outback. Not you guys. This is in 2008. And I gave them discount coupons to the professor's cafeteria and stuff. Whenever I gave that, what happened? Student didn't talk again. Why? Westerners wouldn't understand it. But if you think about it, it's actually very, very interesting. You think something, but not unless you're thinking very deeply do you really understand it. Why would somebody not do it? In North America, it's individual, so the more you get, fine. You're just thinking of yourself. Or in Russia, that might be working fine. But here, if I did it to this nice lady here, she might think, oh, that's not very kind of cool because nobody else is getting it, and I kind of feel like an outsider. They're going to hate me. I should stop talking. I'm not part of the good group. I'm making the others look bad. And some of those students that I knew the answer, and I'd given them stuff, I was saying, here's $10 or here's a gift certificate for Outback Steakhouse. I know you know it. All you got to do is just say it's either A, B, or C. And so what did he do? He reached over to the student beside him and say, the answer is this. Say it. Yodong-seng, say this. Younger sister, younger brother, say this. He would help the other group. He wouldn't take it himself, which would not usually happen in North America. Make sure you understand that. It's very different depending on where you are. South Korea, we're talking a lot about that. I've already talked to you about Adler. This slide is kind of important. What is culture? This circle of life is similar to the Hakuna Matata in some sense. You need to know the circle of values, and you need to know the triangle, Hakuna Matata. Well, this culture comes from values, number one. And values are attitudes, and attitudes make your behavior, and the behavior makes your culture. Some people say it can never change. Some people say it does change. We can argue both very, very easily. Maybe your research papers can talk about, does management values in China change over time? How is the management values in China different than the management values in Korea or Japan or United States? So those are management topics to think about specifically. We already talked about ethnocentrism. The big thing I want to talk about is basically the last. So I've already talked about the 4 things. There's the economic development model, the environmental model, the behavioral model, the open systems model, the most comprehensive, which is Adler. This is the last page, and the last page is questions for discussion. Each chapter of the book has questions at the back of the book. These are some of the questions. What are the 4 basic models of comparative management and their main points of argument? We already said that. We just said those 4 points. What do you think is the role of culture in comparative management? It's crucial. What are the thoughts concerning Hofstede's 4 dimensions? Or number 4, do you agree with the criticisms that comparative management studies have dominated by the American ideas? Is that true? Do we need to change these? A lot of you need to do a term paper. You need to get together with 3 other people, make a term paper, and you also need to work with your groups of 3 to put up comments in Facebook and talk about them in class. But when you're looking for those videos to comment on, a lot of you might go here. You might go here. Harvard, right? You want to get the Harvard information. But don't forget that the Harvard stuff, a lot of it is dominated by the Western views. You really need to understand that the Korean values, Chinese values, Indian values are incredibly important and different. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's a very smart thing to get some of your ideas from here. This is the Indian site, but you can get them from Brazil, from Ireland, Australia. There's sites like this all over the world. If you want these details, I wrote something for Forbes a while ago. It's listing many of the different sources to get these videos around the world. We're finished. Thank you very much, folks. You're happy we're done.